Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Chats with Emily. That's what we're calling our reading through the poetry of Emily Dickinson, especially contained in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 148, All Overgrown by Cunning Moss. This is another tribute poem. We've gone through several of these now in order in the Johnson edition, and we now turn to a poem which was published in 1896 with the title Charlotte Bronte's Grave. And in fact, this is a tribute poem to the great Charlotte Bronte. The poem, scholars believe, was written maybe the 31st of March, 1859, on the 4th anniversary of Charlotte Bronte's death. And of course, Charlotte Bronte, the great writer of Jane Eyre, we'll have more to say about that in a moment. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you already were exposed to our set of introductory comments. I'm also hopeful that you have already worked with our preceding 147 poems. We just finished with Bless God He Went As Soldiers. Now, Charlotte Bronte, her years 1816 to 1855, of course, is best known as being the author of that classic text, Jane Eyre, of 1847. Emily's father had a partner named Bowden, as we commented before, and it was probably him who made sure that Emily was reading this novel, Jane Eyre, within 2 years of its publication of 1847. There is an argument to be made, and a few scholars have made it, that you can't read Emily Dickinson without appreciating the Bronte sisters. Of course, Charlotte and Emily herself, Emily Bronte, the author of Wuthering Heights. And in some ways, there's almost no way to say how much influence both of the Bronte sisters had on the life of Emily as especially writer-poet. Now, there's very interesting debate about this poem in regards to some lines that are going to be absent from the Johnson performance here that we'll be reading, and so we'll be able to work with both of those. Let's enjoy this great tribute poem, and notice the dance that Emily has between the classical tradition and the Christian tradition. I'm fascinated by this poem for a number of reasons. All overgrown by cunning moss, all interspersed with weed, the little cage of Currier Bell in quiet Hawthorne laid. Gathered from many wanderings, Gethsemane can tell through what transporting anguish she reached the asphodel. Soft fall the sounds of Eden upon her puzzled ear. Oh, what an afternoon for heaven when Bronte entered there. Now, this is, again, one of those poems that will assume a certain knowledge that Emily has to know most readers of her day don't have. For example, Currier Bell being the pen name of Charlotte Bronte, and Haworth in Yorkshire, where her father's church, where she's buried. None of that is stuff that normal readers would know. But notice she does mention Bronte at the very end in quotation marks to help the reader of her own day understand what's going on. I love the fact that the first two sets of lines will begin with the word all, and then the use of the word cunning, all overgrown by cunning moss. You'll remember in poem 59, it was cunning Jacob. In 8 poems, Emily uses this term, cunning. I actually think it's an important word. I think it ties nicely to her use of puzzled at the end of this poem, and I think that this poem, this word cunning, represents a whole lot of Emily's project. I think Emily, as I have said a number of times already in earlier lectures, Emily's having a lot of fun in the writing of these poems, and I think that the word cunning is important here. All overgrown by cunning moss, all interspersed with weed. In other words, already the grave of Emily, now some possibly 4 years afterwards, is already starting to be kind of covered over and that kind of thing. In other words, I think there's some argument to be made that 3 going on now 4 years, that maybe Charlotte's starting to be forgotten a little bit, and maybe there's some concern for Emily, and that's why she writes this poem. Then we have the use of the word little. 172 poems emphasize this word, as we've said. She loves this word. The Little Cage of Courier Bell, again, Courier Bell is the pen name for Charlotte Bronte. In Quiet, Haworth laid, and again, as we've said, Haworth in Yorkshire, England, is where Charlotte was laid to rest in her father's church. And then there's the Break. Now, this is the moment where I'm going to turn to the poem in extension. And although not published here, I want to make sure that you know that there were actually 2 more stanzas with the word "or" to follow it. I'm just going to go ahead and read the entire poem, including these lines that are not a part of our reading. All overgrown by cunning moss, all interspersed with weed, the little cage of Courier Bell in quiet Haworth laid. This bird, now these are lines, the new lines, inserted but not a part of the Johnson publishing. This bird, observing others when frost too sharp became, retired to other latitudes, quietly did the same, but differed in returning, since Yorkshire hills are green. Yet not in all the nests I met can nightingale be seen. Or, gathered from many wanderings, Gethsemane can tell, and then the rest of the poem. I find that a fascinating set of lines that will not appear here, but emphasizes that Emily is how would you say it, radical in many ways, different from other writers, and already possibly being maybe a little bit forgotten. We come back to the word gathered. Gathered, and now we're talking obviously about Emily's burial. Gathered from many wanderings. It is significant that she uses the word wanderings because it will make us think of Odysseus. And of course, here in a moment, we'll be referencing the Odyssey with Asphodel, right? Gathered from many wanderings, Gethsemane can tell through what transporting anguish, and we think of Gethsemane, and right away, obviously, this is that powerful moment of Christ's passion. We will see Gethsemane referenced in poems 313 and 553, but it's in poem 1432 when we get there that we'll return back to this poem, because in 1432, these 4 lines are quite remarkable. Spurn the temerity, rashness of Calvary, gay were Gethsemane, knew we of thee. Fascinating set of lines. And of course, Gethsemane is symbolic of anguish, right? Through what transporting anguish, and of course, the study of of Charlotte Bronte's biography is sad, because by the end of her life, she did have a terrible neuroses. That was a part of her departing, right? Of course, this reference to Asphodel is going to take us to the flowers in the Elysian fields in Odyssey 24. We gave full lectures on the Odyssey at learnstrong.net. You can run those to ground, and you can go to our comments specifically of Odyssey 24 at the very end of the Odyssey, when the Elysian fields, the happy fields are there. In other words, notice it's going to be here, Asphodel first, and then it'll be heaven a few seconds later, with Eden in between, which I find fascinating. Soft fall the sounds of Eden. Eden referenced in 17 poems of Emily's. Upon her puzzled ear, you'll remember puzzled from poem 48. And this idea of puzzling, I think, makes some sense. My Emily group pointed this out to me, and I love that they pointed this out, that if it is the case that Charlotte Bronte passed with some pretty serious, challenging neuroses, then it's very possible that the word puzzled here has to do with she arrived in heaven and she was maybe a little bit shocked or puzzled by what exactly it is that was going on. I think Emily is saying something quite different about Charlotte Bronte, though. I think what she's saying is that Charlotte Bronte arrived in heaven in Eden in Asphodel and can't believe that she's there. That is to say, she challenged all of the authority figures, especially, of course, with her publishing of Jane Eyre, right? Upon her puzzled ear, and then her use of the word "oh," and we commented on this in poem 146. You'll remember 5 times in poem 1, this "oh" construction gets used in 72 poems. Emily plays this game of this use of the word "oh." I have commented earlier in an earlier lecture, I believe it was lecture 146, that the word oh and the way she uses it is a very American kind of use. It's almost like, oh, you know, oh, like that, almost like a filler. And it qualifies a certain kind of tone that Emily's playing with. Oh, what an afternoon for heaven. I love, it's not morning, it's not evening, it's afternoon. What an afternoon for heaven. In other words, maybe she's suggesting heaven was a little shocked to find Charlotte Bronte joining them when Bronte entered there. Exclamation point. In other words, how interesting it must have been in heaven when Charlotte Bronte showed up. The great Charlotte Bronte, the iconoclastic Charlotte Bronte, and dare we say it, the one that Emily will identify with. Of course, Emily identifying as well with Charlotte's sister, Emily Bronte, no question. What are we going to say about this poem at 2A? Well, I think the argument that she's making is the great poets always deserve respect, even the respect of heaven. I love that. At 2B, I love her dance between the classical Astaphyl and the biblical illusion of Gethsemane. I love how she plays that game. At 3A, I'm thinking now with you guys about Dante's Divine Commedia. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Do you remember in that first part of the Commedia, Inferno, where Dante shows up in limbo to meet with the great poets, and he's welcomed, of course, by those great poets, Virgil obviously paramount to be his guide through the underworld and beyond. And it seems, we said it back then in our comments there, it seems as if Dante wants to be himself included in that pantheon of great writers. I think it's possible Emily's playing a similar game. In other words, is it at all possible that Emily's already asking, I wonder how heaven will receive me? Because like Charlotte, I've done a few things that maybe would make heaven turn askance, right? A little bit away from me. And finally at 3B, I love this question because of her celebration of Charlotte Bronte. Who is the Charlotte Bronte in your life? Who is the individual that you look at and you kind of marvel at his or her courage, their willingness to step outside? I'm guessing for a few of you, I mean this far into our study of Emily, it might be Emily Dickinson. I hope so. Thank you.